Hello, listeners. Welcome back to the episode. We're going to be talking today about successful men, relationships, successful men and sexless relationships, which you wouldn't believe is incredibly common, right? We often think that a man who has everything, he has the job, he has the house, he has a lovely wife and everything, you think everything in his life must be rosy. And I can tell you from coaching them that it's far from true. It just looks that way because they've learned the very important skill, which we teach men generally, is to have a wonderful facade of your life so people think you're great and to hide the rest of the shit underneath the sheets. That's a wonderful pun. And today with me, I have a wonderful guest, a woman who has a real breadth of experience from a world of science and the technical and all the things that I don't fully understand because it's way beyond my understanding of chemistry. Trained at MIT, who had a life turn and changed and shifted into a completely different avenue of work of relationship coaching, but didn't just shift into this work and got a little qualification. She went and she trained with the best people in the market, you know, the leaders out there, you know, people like John Wyland, who we've had on the podcast, the Gottmans and Layla Martin. So today I have with me Dr. Jessica Gold. How are you doing, Jessica?
I'm doing great this morning. It's so exciting to be here with you, David. Thank you.
It's wonderful to have you. I'd like to jump straight in. So you were training as a chemist, got your PhD, and I guess I'm wondering, when was it that you realized that the training you had got, this, you know, working with chemicals and understanding and the periodic table and all these very intelligent, difficult things to understand, wasn't actually supporting you in your relational life?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so what happened was I was a chemist for nearly 10 years, studying chemistry and neuroscience, and I loved being in lab. I got into this because I wanted to use my hands to work with the primal materials of life and figure out, what is everything made of? How does all this work? Like, what is this reality that we're in? And it was pretty fun for a long time. I mean, getting to sit around with my peers, some of the best minds in the world on chemistry and physics and neuroscience, and listen to these really high level conversations, I was so intellectually satisfying. But what I didn't want to admit to myself was that in order to be a scientist, I felt like I had to disconnect from my body, my emotions, my humanity, really. And I had a very strict way of living life. I was really trying to logic my way through everything. I was just ignoring my emotions and trying to figure everything out with the mind. And what happened then was I started having a lot of anxiety. All of my relationships, not just my marriage, but also my friendships, were really stressful because I was trying to control them. And I didn't realize it at the time, but sort of trying to control the relating so that I would feel comfortable always and not have to face difficult emotions. And I started having trouble sleeping, trouble with anxiety, lots of just fatigue. And I was drinking too much to cover it all up. And finally, it came to a breaking point. I had some experiences at Burning Man and other places in the Bay Area, you know, around San Francisco. You can have a lot of deep experiences. I had some deeper experiences of connection, of what it was like to try to just be who I was and meet reality as it is in my body, in my heart and mind in the moment. And that cracked something open inside of me. And I realized I knew everything about chemical bonding, but in my whole scientific career, all of these classes that I'd had at all these different schools, you know, MIT, Berkeley, UCSF, I had never had a single class in how to have healthy relationships. I'd never had a single class in human bonding. And that was costing me my marriage. I remember my ex-husband, he's a therapist, and I'm grateful to him for many things, including he really tried to open the door for me to get out of this sort of logic and reason only way of being. I specifically remember one time we were having an argument again, and he said, you know, Jessica, you don't actually have to be defensive when we talk. And that did not compute at all for me. I was like, what are you talking about? First of all, I felt a lot of shame because I realized I'd been defensive most of my life, and the idea that that was like bad or wrong was intolerable. And then secondly, what I said to him was like, of course I have to be defensive. I'm being defensive in return, right? I, I thought if I'm not defensive, people will walk all over me. But he wasn't trying to walk all over me. He was trying to connect. And many of the men that I work with, they've said to me things, similar things. They've said, well, Jessica, if I'm not being defensive or giving advice, what other way of communicating is there? And I also had no idea at that time in my life. Or if I had an inkling, it just felt icky. It felt uncouth to do something else. Like, oh, understanding, empathizing, validating. Ugh, that seems weak. Why would I ever do that? So to answer your question, it was a gradual process, but really one day I just was standing in lab. I was doing pipetting in those 96 well plates with a multi-channel pipetter, a radioactive solution over and over and over again. It was Saturday afternoon. And finally, something inside of me said, you are not supposed to be doing this, Jessica. And I was like, oh no, I've been trying to do this for 10 years. I can't change. But I knew that it was right. And so I put down my multi-channel pipetter forever. And left lab. I mean, I did publish my work first, but then I left. And I ended up going traveling for a year with the purpose to say yes to what I would normally be a reflexive no to. So to open a little bit, to say yes to things that scared me or that triggered me. And that was really how it started.
Wow, I have this vision of you with the pipetta thing, you know, boom, 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 boom. That's over like almost quite like repetitive work, isn't it? So your brain has a lot of space to do things. You start to imagine, you reflect and look at yourself. And
Yeah.
you know what you said there about defensiveness versus kind of empathy, understanding is something I've heard of a lot of men is the only way we learn to communicate is like defending our position, like avoiding being wrong, telling other people they're wrong, or telling other people they need to do something different, and that becomes a whole kind of communication. And I've been in groups of men, and you sit and no one can actually listen. Everyone's listening through this lens of response. How can I respond to you? Or unconsciously, how can I shut you up so I don't have to listen to your problems anymore?
Mm-hmm. Yep, that's the playbook I was handed too. And you know, when I learned, so it wasn't until after my divorce that I ended up spending 4 years in communities oriented around personal growth, silent meditation retreats, shadow work, good communication practices, emotional fluency, all that stuff. And it was only after my divorce that I actually learned all of the research that exists out there about how to have great relationships. And I was so stunned. I couldn't believe that, you know, I was in therapy before and even no therapist ever sat me down and said, hey, Jessica, you might want to like study these books, or you might want to know about this research. Or they didn't say it to me in a way that my analytical mind could receive. Like, and I was so stunned. I was like, wow, we know exactly what to do. In fact, there's rather a consensus among the research about like what makes good relating. And I just could not believe that I hadn't received this information. And it lit a fire under me to figure out, how can I bring this to other very logical minded people like I was? How can I be a translator for this work and help it land better? And so, you know, what you're saying, this thing about defensiveness, that's supposed to be what works. That's supposed to be what's strong. You're supposed to just harangue the other person until they admit that you're right, and then they calm down because they see, oh, I never needed to be upset in the first place. But we know from a neuroscience point of view exactly why that doesn't work in your brain. And so actually using these other strategies, these other modalities of validation, empathy, like feeling, it's strategic, not soft. It's scientific and strategic, not soft.
Step-by-step processes, there's a lot of frameworks for, conflict, conversation, empathy, understanding. But I do have a question, actually. You're working with men, successful men, founders, entrepreneurs. And, like you described about yourself, they've built their career on kind of logic, on being smart and solving complex problems, especially men in tech. They can solve these complex tech problems of infrastructure and all sorts of wild things that, lay people have no idea is happening and supporting, like their Netflix, for example. What happens when their super complex ability mind meets a relational challenge? Like, what kind of occurs in that moment, and maybe even some of the steps along the way for them?
I think this is really the heart of relating here. And I've also founded a software company, so I really get it. What is prized at work versus what isn't prized at home. So I think there's three things that happen when a mind that's been trained to solve complex problems meets the relational problem at home. And the first is it tries to use the strategies that work so well at work, like optimization, problem solving, arguing the facts, getting stuff done, productivity. I mean, at work, you have all these things that are measured. There's KPIs, there's regular feedback, there's systems and structures that tell you, that prize logic. And so, of course, if you're honing that, if that's what you've been told makes you successful, then you're going to try to use that at home to solve the relational problems. The second thing I think that happens is there's these inner paradigms that we carry around relationships today, where we see our partner or our relationship as a place of comfort rather than a catalyst for growth. So if she's holding up a mirror to you, you see it as, oh no, something's really wrong, I need to fix this, instead of an opportunity to connect more deeply, to grow together. And the third thing that happens is the capacity that you had to suppress at work. So being emotional, you have to usually suppress that at work. Like if you're emotional, you're seen as less high achieving at work usually. But that's the exact capacity that is being asked for at home. You need to be able to handle your emotions, be able to relate to hers, and also to sort of feel into the situation, to notice, like, okay, what is going on here? What is she hoping that I'm going to understand? Because unfortunately, a lot of relationships operate on the paradigm of she might be expecting you to read her mind, which is not good relationality, but it happens a lot. So having to use the body, intuition, and emotions at the forefront. And those are capacities that aren't as prized at work usually. As a chemist, I studied everything about bonding. And as a relationship chemist, what I do now, I'm also studying bonding, but of course at the romantic level, at the interpersonal level. And I couldn't help but think, do the same strategies